Several articles were placed in the ministry magazine during the 1970s promoting country living. The About section on their site says Ministry International Journal for Pastors has been published monthly by the Seventh-day Adventist Church since 1928. Seventh-day Adventist pastors and ministers around the globe constitute the publication's main readership, although many clergy of other communities of faith also receive the magazine. In the September 1973 issue, an article was entitled, "Who Me? Moved to the Country?" It described how God led Richard Hansen to find a country home and work at the Wildwood Sanitarium. Here's an excerpt from the article. Several years ago, while attending medical school and preparing for marriage, I came across a statement in the Ministry of Healing, page 365. The more nearly we come into harmony with God's original plan, the more favorable will be our position to secure health of body and mind and soul. Shortly thereafter, my wife and I recognized that in planning for a home, we should seek the Lord's guidance and follow His plan. Knowing that God's people are going to face tremendous problems in the future, one of which is buying and selling, we sought counsel concerning the best means to prepare for these crises. Again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families away from the cities into the country where they can raise their own provisions, for in the future, the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. In the January 1974 article entitled Sunday Laws and Leaving the Cities, the editor in Imagination interviews Ellen G. White. The editor, J.R. Spangler, posted questions concerning prophecy and coming Sunday laws. He then gave Ellen White quotes that served to answer each question. Next, he turned the discussion to country living. He asked, how should God's people who live in the cities react as they see evidences that national Sunday laws may soon be enacted? Should we now begin to definitely plan to move out of the cities? What obligation do we have as far as means with which we have been entrusted are concerned? The Ellen White answer said, a crisis is soon to come in regard to the observance of Sunday. The Sunday party is strengthening itself in its false claims, and this will mean oppression to those who determine to keep the Sabbath of the Lord. If in the providence of God we can secure places away from the cities, the Lord would have us do this. There are troublous times before us. I see the necessity of the people of God moving out of the cities into retired country places, where they may cultivate the land and raise their own produce. Thus they may bring their children up with simple, healthful habits. I see the necessity of making haste to get all things ready for the crisis. The editor responded, that's very clear and plain. Are there other reasons that you have been shown why now is the time for us to especially begin to take seriously the instruction God has given you over the years about leaving the cities? The answer was, in harmony with the light given me, I am urging people to come out from the great centers of population. Our cities are increasing in wickedness, and it is becoming more and more evident that those who remain in them unnecessarily do so at the peril of their soul's salvation. The editor asked, but shouldn't we keep some work in the cities? And even if conditions get very difficult, can't we leave anytime we want to in the future? Our restaurants must be in the cities, for otherwise the workers in these restaurants could not reach the people and teach them the principles of right living. And for the present, we shall have to occupy meeting houses in the cities. But ere long there will be such strife and confusion in the cities that those who wish to leave them will not be able. In the June 1976 Ministry magazine, there was an article entitled, Warning, City Living is Dangerous to Your Health, written by Dennis Blum, the chairman of the Health Science Department, Columbia Union College. It pointed out the dangers to physical, emotional, and mental health by living in the cities. According to the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, the air we breathe in our big cities ordinarily contains high levels of carbon monoxide, a highly toxic gas that interferes with normal intake of oxygen, another gas essential to life. Carbon monoxide levels are high enough in city air to slow down the reactions of even the healthiest persons, making them more prone to accidents. The National Tuberculosis and Respiratory Disease Association confirms that high rates of illness and death are associated with the polluted air that hangs overhead in a motionless mass. Emotional health is also adversely affected in urban areas. Overcrowding is more harmful than we realize, probably because it is so subtle. Dubose says, paradoxically, the dangers of overpopulation will be increased by the extreme adaptability of the human race. Human beings can adapt to almost anything: polluted air, treeless avenues, starless skies, aggressive behavior, the rat race of over-competitive societies, even life in concentration camps. Because we adapt so easily to almost anything, does that mean we are maintaining good, balanced emotional health? Not necessarily. Parr states that every thought and feeling we experience leaves its traces on our personality. If enduring features of our surroundings provoke steadily predominant moods or frequently repeated emotional responses, the conclusion seems inescapable that the environment itself may be a major determinant of personality. In a report to the 94th Congress, the Stanford Research Institute tells us that anxiety, alienation, disorder, and mistrust seem to be part of the price we must pay for the adaptation of our individual and collective social arrangements to an economic system which brings us such great material benefits. What a price for material benefits! Certainly, this is not God's plan for a healthy, happy, holy life. Our Creator is concerned about the whole man, not what size house we own or how much income we bring home. He is not concerned about how popular the school is which we or our children attend. He wants us in the best environment so we can prepare for eternal life. He wants us to be where we can best be transformed into His image. In 1908, Ellen White said, "Do not consider it a privation when you are called to leave the cities and move out into country places. Here there await rich blessings for those who will grasp them. By beholding the scenes of nature, the works of the Creator, by studying God's handiwork, imperceptibly you will be changed into the same image." The article ends saying, as opportunities arise for us to seek a more rural life, we might carefully and prayerfully consider the consequences for ourselves and our families. No sacrifice is too great if we would but gain heaven. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? In June 1980, Ministry Magazine published an article entitled, "How Shall We Work the Cities?" It featured two perspectives on city evangelism, one based on living outside of the cities and the other based on living within the cities. The article on working it from without was written by Ted Wilson, our current GC president, who at the time was the director of Metropolitan Ministries in New York City. The article begins with Ted Wilson listing some of Ellen White's counsels on city evangelism. After reviewing the information, he said, "It appears that the cities of the world should be worked from outpost centers in the country, where workers live, and come into the city to labor in house-to-house evangelism, local church evangelism, public evangelism, literature evangelism, and in medical missions and vegetarian restaurants." God seems to be indicating to us that our church mission to the great urban centers is to bring Christ to people in the city, allow the power of the Holy Spirit to convert them, and then help them to get out of the city. We should be warning all those in the cities who can to get out of the city while they are still able to do so. For the Lord has indicated that the time will soon come when those who wish to leave the cities will not be able to do so. He then addressed a common question that is asked in regard to country living. He said, "Some have asked, if we are to work in the cities, should we not live in the cities? If you wish to reach the city people, you must eat, sleep, live, and breathe the city and neighborhood in order to identify with the people. His response was, "Such a position appeals to human logic, but seemingly does not harmonize with God's counsel." Some may say that the rural life ideal that prevails in the church is not unique to Adventists, but was taken over from others by church pioneers and has become the cultural hand baggage that still constitutes much of the church's value system, and that we need to shed or modify that concept. He continued, "This article is based upon a literal acceptance of the spirit of prophecy as fully applicable for the highly complex and sophisticated world of the latter 20th century. Consider the following quotations in light of the assertions made thus far. The cities are to be worked from outposts. Said the messenger of God, shall not the cities be warned? Yes, not by God's people living in them, but by their visiting them, to warn them of what is coming upon the earth. Out of the cities, out of the cities. This is the message the Lord has been giving me. The earthquake will come, the floods will come, and we are not to establish ourselves in the wicked cities, where the enemy is served in every way and where God is so often forgotten." In 1899, Ellen White resoundingly stated God's position in the plainest terms possible. As God's commandment-keeping people, we must leave the cities. As did Enoch, we must work in the cities but not dwell in them. He addressed another concern saying, "Some may question, is there a different method to be used in New York City than has been discussed? Have the methods been changed? Are they outdated?" In view of these questions, consider the words written by Ellen White in 1910 in Medical Ministry, page 304. "There is no change in the messages that God has sent in the past. The work in the cities is the essential work for this time. When the cities are worked as God would have them, the results will be the setting in operation of a mighty movement such as we have not yet witnessed." It is interesting to note that the current editor for Ministry Magazine is Pavel Goya. He is also listed as an associate ministerial secretary for the General Conference. There is a clip of him preaching on YouTube entitled, "When to Leave the Cities." Here's a snippet.
By the way, when the calamities come and attacks come, the spirit of prophecy, he says they will attack the big cities. Let me ask you, did the planes hit Lawrenceburg in 9/11? Did the planes hit Shelbyville? No, they hit New York. I don't know if you get the message. Leave the big cities. Okay, let's go into it. Let's dive into it, because this is, how do we leave the cities and when? I give you the answer. I give you the answer. God told Abraham and Lot to leave Ur, or however you say it in English. They left. But then it was not comfortable. I mean, we stay in a cabin, in a log house, in a tent, and they got to a place. And Lot says, I choose the city. Abraham says, no, I'm going to stay in the outside. You follow me? What happened to Lot's family? He lost his family. I don't know if you heard me. We leave the cities in stages. What did I say? We leave the cities in stages, and I'm going to explain you how. I'll give you the 3 stages one by one. First, let me give you a few quotations. Out of the cities. This is the message the Lord has given me. Earthquakes will come, floods will come, fires will come, attacks will come, 9/11 will come. Establish yourselves. Do not establish yourself in the cities where the enemy is served in every way, where God is forgotten. We must make plans to warn the cities, yet to live outside the cities where our children are protected from the influence of the city. Country Living, page 31. Listen, another one. The time is near when the large city will be visited by judgments. In a little while, this city will be terribly shaken. Folks, you may not like it, but that's not my message. Make different plans. Leave the cities.
The General Conference Executive Committee gave a strong endorsement to country living at the October 17, 1978 Annual Council meeting. A little background information from the GC site. What is the GC Executive Committee? The second highest governing body of the Seventh-day Adventist Church after General Conference session, which occurs every 5 years. In between sessions, the Executive Committee is delegated the authority to act on behalf of the General Conference in session. When does the Executive Committee meet? During 2 annual meetings, Annual Council and Spring meetings. Annual Council is held every year, usually in the month of October, for considering budgets for the divisions, making appropriations, and transacting of business and/or adoption of policy pertaining to the operation of the worldwide field. Who is on the Executive Committee? The General Conference administrators and departmental directors, division administrators, union presidents, past GC presidents, leaders of church institutions such as Andrews University, and up to 40 members at large comprising denominational employees, lay members, and young adults. This General Conference Executive Committee gave a strong endorsement to country living at the October 17, 1978 Annual Council meeting. It reads, voted to adopt the following document on country living. 1. Institutional development and relocation. A. That in the planning and development of new building programs for medical institutions, publishing houses, offices, colleges, and boarding academies, that the following counsel be taken into consideration. 1. That such institutions be located outside of heavily populated urban areas, but within reasonable access to such areas. 2. That such institutions be located where workers may follow the counsel. We must make wise plans to warn the cities and at the same time live where we can shield our children and ourselves from the contaminating and demoralizing influences so prevalent in these places. 3. That plans for new institutions be as modest and economical as possible. B. That boards of large institutions whose surroundings have changed to an urban environment and who are facing major rebuilding programs be sensitive to the counsels regarding the locations of these institutions as stated by Ellen G. White as to the ideal locations for such institutions. The document continues. 2. Evangelistic outreach. A. That we give priority in our evangelistic planning to the massive challenge of the large cities, and that we plan for our work in these cities in harmony with the inspired counsels of Ellen G. White. 1. The cities are to be worked from the outpost. Said the messenger of God, shall not the cities be warned? Yes, not by God's people living in them, but by their visiting them, to warn them of what is coming upon the earth. 2. All that Lot and his family did in Sodom could have been done by them even if they had lived in a place some distance away from the city. Enoch walked with God, and yet he did not live in the midst of any city, polluted with every kind of violence and wickedness as did Lot in Sodom. 3. It is God's design that our people should locate outside the cities, and from these outposts warn the cities. 3. Counsels to church members. A. That church members be urged to study the counsels to move out of the large and heavily populated cities to areas that are more rural or to smaller towns, keeping in mind the following principles. 1. That city to country living does not necessarily mean city to farm situations miles removed from city areas, but it means relocation to more rural or small town areas conducive to the spiritual and physical welfare of the family, where land for a garden is available. 2. That country living does not necessitate purchasing a farm, but might entail the operation of a small business or industry. 3. That a good piece of land where a good water supply and garden space are available would be desirable. 4. that individuals should find employment or seek self-employment sufficient to sustain their families before moving from the cities to rural areas, thus avoiding discouragement and a subsequent move back to the city. 5. That some members could well move from large cities to smaller, unintered towns or counties and begin work to raise up a memorial to the Lord as self-supporting workers. B. That arrangements be made to republish the pamphlet From City to Country Living, so that church members contemplating a change in home location may have opportunity to secure and study this pamphlet, along with the counsel given in the pamphlet Country Living by Ellen White. C. That church leaders, Spirit of Prophecy directors, or other persons appointed for this purpose in the union and local conferences make themselves acquainted with the counsels regarding these matters and seek to guide our church members who may be contemplating a move to a more rural area. D. That while these counsels are kept before the members as ideals towards which they should prayerfully strive, it should be recognized that there are many new converts whose economic situation makes it practically impossible to immediately follow this counsel. Therefore, effort should be made to suggest alternative measures for such persons so they can raise and train their families as nearly as possible in harmony with the guidelines for country living. Note that both versions of the EDW app have the book Country Living listed. The Ellen White Estate website has the book as well. The AdventistBookCenter.com has a physical copy of the book Country Living listed for sale. Note the details refer to the advantages of country living, and it says, "This counsel is republished to engage the attention of every church member." This copy was published in 1999. From City to Country Living is also for sale on the site. The details state the book encourages us to comply with the inspired counsel of Ellen White. This was republished in 2008. Furthermore, the books Adventist Home, Ministry of Healing, Evangelism, and Last Day Events all contain chapters on country living. It's interesting to note the book Last Day Events is a compilation that was first published in 1992. On the Adventist Book Center's site, they feature a republication from 2001. In the details section for the book, it lists among the topics country living. Looking a little further, you will see the site has a product attachment which features a free study guide on the book Last Day Events. Chapter 7 of the study guide begins with the question, Ellen White's message for this time was, and get out as. The answer is, Ellen White's message for this time was out of the cities and get out as soon as possible.